So, Zero, feel free to jump in. We definitely wanted, so we've been doing a lot of research. Zero and I've been watching a lot of videos, just understanding like simple terminology, steps, methods, and I think definitely getting your first-hand experience kind of helps us point in the direction we want to go in. A lot of our questions isn't like, technical questions, more like seeking advice on what we should do in our current situation, So
Hmm.
one example is, we were just talking about let's find our first property in Jacksonville. We talked about earlier of like, do we want to do Jacksonville? Do we want to consider other regions? So one question for you might be, do you advise the first property be someplace that one of us is local to, so we can get more of like that initial hands-on experience? Or do you think in today's day it's easy enough for someone like us starters to just find a property, let's say the Midwest, and hire someone to help us manage? So if
Yeah.
you have any,
So this is the advice there is it's depends on each every person every like it's the advice is different for every person, but my personal belief is I think it's easier to buy something local if you can. Like I couldn't when I was in San Jose. I just couldn't like the numbers didn't make sense. But it's and you can definitely buy in the Midwest and learn and hire people and there's like a different like set of learning for that and trust. But the easiest thing is to buy local, to buy in a market you're familiar with. Like for Tallahassee, I grew up there. I know the area. You guys know Jacksonville. You don't have to think too much about it, right? There's certain areas you're like, I don't want to buy there. There's certain areas you're like, that's a pretty good place, or like they're decent, right? So and the fact that Zuriel, you're there, you can drive around, you can actually like that. You have an advantage that a lot of people don't have. Like the people in California, they want to buy in Florida, they can't just go to Jacksonville at any time and just like drive around randomly. They have to like plan for that. You can just do that like any day. So for me, my personal belief is like I think it's easier for you to buy in Jacksonville or in a market that you're comfortable with that which is still Jacksonville at this point, right? So or like Gainesville, maybe even.
Yeah, and I was thinking about it, like for Mark and I, if we're gonna do something together, I think the first step for us is to agree on like a buy box. Mark, I know you were working on a sheet before this because we watched a Bigger Pockets video and it basically broke out the buy box into a set of like all these. All right, so we just got kicked off of the last meeting on our free trial version. So part two of this video series. Um, I guess to recap, we were just talking about what Mark and I should do as newbie investors. I think I was stating that, my belief is that Mark and I need to align on our buy box. We were watching a variety of Bigger Pocket YouTube videos, and it seems like that would be like a good first step. And in the video that we both watched, it broke out the buy box into a set of discrete choices. So I think this would be a good segue for Mark to share his screen. And then maybe we could just bounce off both Mark and I's thoughts to you, and then see like, if you kind of agree with that outlook, if you have a different perspective, and we can work top to bottom from there. So Mark, maybe let's do some, maybe we can do bolding on like the categories such as like deal type, management plan, so that way if anyone's watching, they can follow along and see, what are the areas we're thinking of. But for you, if you hadn't seen the video, we have deal type, management plan, business plan, financing, asset class, ownership structure, property class, location, purchase price, rehab costs, risk target, and then ROE target. Um, I wasn't keeping track, but I think that's like 8 or so different categories. So starting towards the top of this list, deal type. Mark, do you want to take that? I actually don't recall what that meant.
yeah, deal type was my understanding of the video, and if you know, feel free to correct me. But essentially, it was just kind of like when you buy the house, what is the plan you're going to use the house, So in this, the most general case is probably just straight up rentals, renting out. There were other deal types such as buy the house, do a quick rapid 3 to 6 month flipping, and just resell it again. So deal type is just generally basically what you plan on doing with the property once you purchase it.
I just want to say
So
like I love this that you guys like throw all this out and like have some kind of like strategy.
thanks.
Yeah, well, I guess so, Mark, we can kind of bounce back and forth, and then you can chime in with his, perspective. But I think maybe for the first deal that we both do, we could just do like a rental, like just a regular rental, whether that's medium term or long term. We could decide down the road, but I think that might be better than like some type of value add, like a burr, where you try to do the renovation and like try to sell it like, down the road real quick.
Yeah, so I was gonna say that this kind of just depends on you and your risk tolerance. So if you're like, I want to like do a flip, like I want to like take a nasty house and make it look really nice, and then go to a bank and hopefully it's worth a lot more. Um, well, that would be a burr. You would go to a bank, you would refinance out. Let's say like you bought a house for 200K, and like that house fixed up in the area it's 300K. I think if you go to a bank, they will let you take, I forget, it's 60 or 70% of your money back. So let's say you bought a house for 200K, right? You put in, I don't know, like 20K. I'm just making numbers up. So you're all in for, I don't know, either 220 or the finance portion, which is like 5-10%, depending on how you buy it. Typically 20% if you're doing investment property. So it'd be 40K plus 20K in rehab. I'm talking about light rehab, but like this is unrealistic, but I'm just saying for easy numbers sake. So you're all in for 60K, and then now the property is worth 300K, and you can go to the bank and they'll give you 210 of that, like back essentially. Was it right? No, sorry. 210 of that would be a loan, and then the other 90K would be back. So you put in a total of 60 and you get 90 back. So you actually made 30K. So that'd be a burr. But like that's like harder to do because deals are hard to find. That's always going to be the biggest issue that you guys are going to run into is finding good deals. If you can find good deals, people say that the money will come. It usually does if you know the right people. So like if you guys find a really good deal, you can talk like, and you have the connections, then most likely they will be like, the person will be like, oh yeah, like I'm comfortable like loaning you some money or like partnering with you on the deal. Like it's the hardest aspect is finding the deal. With rental, it's a lot easier to find a okay deal. It's not as hard because you're just like trying to cash flow like set amount. I don't know what your goals are. Like, are you looking for cash flow? Do you want an X% in cash on cash return? Like, you gotta talk about that and what you want out of it too.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't think we have anything, concrete right now, but that's a good point for further discussion later. But we can go into the management plan. So for me, my personal opinion on it is that I agree with Mark. Like, I think, we don't want to offload completely to, a third party management site and, cut margins really thin. I think since it's in our backyard, like, and we're first getting into it, we want to be a little bit hands-on, at least some portion of it being hands-on so we can like learn the ropes and all of that. So I don't know if it's something where I would want to actively manage it like every single day. I'm keeping track of all the details, but I don't want to be on the other extreme end where I'm not checking in on it at all. So somewhere in between, like, hybrid.
Yeah, I recommend managing it in the beginning by yourself, just to learn the ropes, like you said, and then figuring out whether you want to keep managing it by yourself. It's not hard, but it is annoying. Like there's certain things that like evictions are kind of difficult. Um, but and then like the other aspect of management is you have to have good contractors and like plumbers and people in like specific um like labor divisions that you want to know. Just because like if something happens, most likely always have a good plumber. Always have a good like regular contractor. Those are the two biggest ones, and then like later on maybe like electrical as well, but HVAC as well for Florida. Um, but yeah, if you have all those people like in your pocket, like that's what's gonna happen. They're gonna call you, like the tenant's gonna call you, like, hey, listen, like my toilet's backed up, or like the sink is, there's a leak somewhere, blah blah blah, and you have to call these people to come fix it up. That's basically what a property manager does. But it's also not expensive to hire out. But this is like, I think it's good to, personal opinion, I think it's good to learn just so you understand what a property manager does, and then you can determine later on whether you want to hire one out or not. Like, let's say you don't want to be like, let's say we're watching the Super Bowl and like the tenant's like, oh, my toilet's like leaking. Like, you don't want to take that phone call, right? That's why you have, and you don't ever want to take that. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but let's say you just don't want to deal with that ever. That's when you hire a property manager. At that point, you just be managing the property manager because they will call you, but hey, listen, we have this situation. Like, what do you think? And then you say yes or no, kind of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Anything you want to add to that, Mark? Like on, or are you in agreement?
I'm straight on greens with that. I think definitely learning the process of being a property manager that can then help us determine the value. Like, hey, is it worth paying someone to do it for us, or are we a good saving the cost and doing it ourselves? So I like that.
Cool. Yeah, then I guess we can jump into the business plan. So just under the assumption we're going like just straight rental route, short, medium, long. My idea at first, or my initial thought was that with short, like doing Airbnb, it's higher cash flow, but it seems like you would have to be more actively like invested in the process since you always have people coming in and out. Is that conception right, or what's it been like for you? You?
Sorry, can you repeat that question? For what? For a rental? Is it more
Oh,
passive? Is that what you meant?
oh, sorry. So I was thinking like I might want to stray away from the short-term rental option because for me, like it seems like you have to be more highly invested in like the day-to-day operations since you always have people coming in and out. Has that been the case for you, or has it been like relatively chill, like where the level of effort isn't any more higher than like managing medium-term rentals or long-term rentals?
So for long term and medium term, the effort is very little. Um, but short term is a lot more. But to put it into perspective, I spend on average like, I don't know, 5 minutes a day. There's some days where like I have to spend an hour because something broke or the guests complaining about stuff. But on average, 90% of my guests, they go, "Hey, I'm interested in booking this place." You go on your phone, you respond, you say, "Okay, cool," like, great, you're approved or whatever. And then they stay in your unit. You don't talk to them. They leave, and then you call your cleaner to go clean it up. And that's the majority of my like Airbnb clients. But my long term, I maybe get a call from them once or twice a year. So that just shows you like what like level of work there is. 5 minutes a day versus once or twice a year, right? So
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess so. I was thinking it was going to be a lot higher than that. So that could definitely be an option for Mark and I. Are you using any systems to like automate some of these workflows for you?
yeah, technology is so good nowadays that like you can automate a lot of it. I was also gonna say for Airbnb, if you can also ask, you can also look for co-hosters, so or co-hosting companies or people that can co-host. It's basically they manage the operation side. So for this is you just got to look at the math. If it makes sense as a short-term rental, let's say it makes like $3,000 a month, and as a long-term rental it makes 1,500, right? A co-hosting company typically takes about 20 to 25%. I think on average 25% of the revenue. So let's say you make $3,000 on the revenue side, um, and after utilities, let's say it's 2,500. They take 25% of that, and so you're like, okay, like, well, 2,500, 25% of that, it's like I don't know, like another, what is that, 625. So your net will be like around 1,800. You're like, that's still better than a long term. Like, that's fine. And at that point, you're still passive because they are the ones talking to the guests. They're the ones talking to the cleaners. They're the ones handling the stuff. So you just got to do the math to see which one has more possible revenue. The difference is when you do short-term rental, you do have a higher cost of initial investment because you have to buy furniture, you have to, like, set stuff up and all this stuff. So that is something you have to take into consideration as well.
Yeah, that was actually in the back of my mind where it's like, there might be a higher barrier to entry because you just have that upfront capital exit from what you're saving. Versus, on a medium and long term, you make the property itself nice, make sure, HVAC is working, you got appliances in there, but you don't have to uh, deal with any of furniture or anything like that. Mark, are you leaning towards any like short, medium, long, or do you feel like you need to we need to spend a little more thought on it?
Honestly, I was leaning towards long term. I think for the same issues you initially had, Zuriel, but now to hear from you know, I think we definitely had the initial view that short term would be a lot more work, effort up front. Um, but it's starting to sound more manageable, especially with the co-hosted companies. If we have decent revenue and all they do is take 20-25% and we're still profiting more in the long term, then I mean, we always have an Airbnb place to go, right? Place to stay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
we
do get that option too. You can like anytime you're in town, like I wanna stay in my property. Like you have that option. So that's why I kind of like short-term rentals. Um, I wanna mention though, like I don't know what the laws in Jacksonville are. I'm sure it's fine. But you want to make sure the regulations are good in the area that you're in, and especially if there's an HOA. A lot of times HOAs don't allow short-term rentals. So
yeah,
just be cautious about that. Yeah.
I know they had some strict regulations in the beaches where it's like it had to be like a week or like a month or something like that. But I think they're battling that legislation down actually. So I think it's becoming more open, but it's something Mark and I can for sure check into. Cool. Yeah, well, I think we'll put our heads together and figure out like which way we want to take it. With the financing, so one big thing for me is I'm living at home right now. So like my rent is zero, which is why I don't think I want to do a FHA loan and like move anywhere. Because like why would I want to pay money when I'm not paying anything now? So I think we might have to go more with like a conventional investor loan. And you said that's typically 20%. Could it be lower?
Um, Typically it's 20%. I think you can talk to lenders and ask if there's another option, maybe 15%. I actually one if you guys are partnering, I guess it's kind of hard to do, but I was gonna say like for you, Zuriel, like you should consider buying a home with like 5% down and like how do I say this? So I'm like in a recording, but like essentially you can intend to live there, and let's say something happens, you can always like change if that makes sense. Because
Yeah,
my thing
yeah.
is like, yeah. So and then you
Basically,
can just
if
do
any
the primary.
got
What are
it.
you
So
saying?
like I could live there for not necessarily the whole year because if any circumstances come up, like if I had a job change, for example, which is like perfectly legal thing,
Yes,
like,
yes.
I might have the circumstance that forces me to move and then I wouldn't have to like refinance a loan into like a conventional mortgage. I could still keep the FHA stipulations.
Yes. So FHA is a different loan than what I'm talking about. So there's FHA, which is like first time home buyer, like it's it's whatever. You can use it after, like I can still use mine. I'm not a first time. But anyways, that one's 3.5% down. It's like I don't know how to say it because I'm not a loan officer or anything, but it's a separate loan. The one I'm talking about is a primary conventional loan. So for like if you're buying for most people when they're buying a home, they want to use this one because um so this quick background, FHA loan, there's something called like mortgage insurance, and that stays with the loan for like its entire life. So there's
Yeah,
this extra cost you're
PMI.
paying for, yeah, PMI. So you pay for that always. With conventional loan, if you put so typically it's if you put less than 20% down, there's PMI to insure the mortgagee, the bank, in case you default, like there's insurance on that. That's what it does. And for FHA, it's because you're putting such a low down payment, they require that. But the other side of it is they keep it for the life of the loan until you refinance. With a primary, once you hit the 20% equity, you can ask for it to be removed. So it's not too much. It depends on the loan, but for me, like it's always been like $30 a month. But like that's still $30 a month. Like you should not be paying. So once I hit, so for my first duplex, I reached 20%, and I asked, I was like, hey, like, can you just remove it? And they're like, oh, we have to do like an appraisal, and I'm like, okay, that's fine. So and they did it. They're like, okay, your home is now worth more than you have 80% equity, like you're good now. You have to wait 2 years typically, and you have to make sure that the equity is about like you have 20% of equity is the point. But anyways, for you, I was saying like you could put down like 5% down payment, and that's for a primary, like, but you're intending to live in there.
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah,
And then I could theoretically just rent out the other rooms
you
while
could rent
still
out the
living
other
there.
rooms. Yeah, like I don't know if you guys know, but Giovanni's basically doing that. He bought a home. I think he put like 5% down or something, and then he's renting out one of the rooms on Airbnb. So it might be a good idea to ask him because this is like fresh for him. Like this is like he did this like I want to say October of like last year. So this is like still fresh for him.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I watched a Bigger Pockets video recently where they had the chief economists of Zillow and the chief economists of Redfin kind of just talking about their market outlook. And something interesting about this method is that they mentioned that, they don't expect prices to dip below 6% by the end of 2024. So it might, but as the prices dip, obviously competition is going to increase because more people want to get in. So even though interest rates are high, like it might be beneficial for me to do this, and where there could be upside later, where property values will rise as the interest rate goes down, since we're inkling towards like 3 minor rate cuts or so this year. So yeah, thanks for
Yeah,
the option.
yeah. My take on it now is it doesn't really matter too much what the market's doing too much, because when when I bought, everyone was putting in like over like in a lot of markets they were putting in prices over the asking price. So there was like a bidding war going on like at the time that I bought. So everyone's like, oh, like I don't want to pay like 50K over asking. Like that's what you had to do at the time. So I'm not gonna get in. And so they waited, and now it's like the rates are too high. They're like, oh, like the rates are too high. I don't want to get in. So there's always gonna be a reason to not get in. And so for like my ideology about it now is like it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter. As long as you find a deal, you find a deal. Like that's always gonna be the case.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's always deals to be had, no matter what the environment is, if you look hard enough, I guess, is the
Yeah,
takeaway.
exactly. If you look hard enough.
Cool. The next one was the asset class. So I think we were talking about this in our just like private messages back and forth, but it feels like commercial can be like a whole game in itself. So I think Mark and I were still thinking staying in the realm of like single family, multifamily. The only issue with Jacksonville is that, at least from what we've seen, the stock of multifamily is like really low compared to other cities. I think because of the zoning laws. That's just my inkling. I haven't really back checked into it. And then, as you said previously, like usually multifamily isn't in like the best areas. And from like just a quick look of the Zillow map, that's kind of what my findings are as well. So I was thinking single family, but if there is a good multifamily, whether and it's typically duplexes. I haven't really seen triplexes or further that are like affordable. So that's kind of where I'm leaning, where it's like, okay, maybe single family residencies or a duplex if we can find something good.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think for this one, it's also a matter of like how much money you guys are wanting to put into it, like whatever your budget is, because multifamily is a little more expensive as well. I think some loans for multifamily could be as high as 25 to 30% down payment. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, single family is going to be your cheaper bet in terms of how much money you have to put in, just because it's one house versus multifamily, two houses. Right? So,
Okay, yeah. And maybe for the first one, we might want to have like less money tied up in the beginning, especially as we're just really new and getting our feel for it. So I'm thinking single family if that's the case where it's, you might have to put so much money down for a multifamily. Mark, so what are your thoughts?
No, I think that's the same way. I definitely say like you, if you had all the money in the world, would you pick a multifamily over a single family? But it sounds like multifamily is, higher initial investment, higher return. But Zero, to your point, for someone who's starting off first time, it would make sense to risk less to start a little bit of income and then perhaps later on move on to a duplex where we have more income to risk and more reward. But definitely agree, single family, I think, is definitely the way for us to initially start out.
Cool. And then for the ownership structure, if Mark and I are going into like a deal together, do we need to form like a partnership LLC or like, are you familiar with the best way to do this?
I'm not too familiar since I haven't done because I haven't done it. But the general idea is like you guys probably do want to get an LLC and then the LLC owns the property. So that way you both have like 50% like ownership. Um, like that's what I've typically heard of. Some people call it a JV agreement, joint venture. Um, yeah, but I don't really know too much about it. But I would just say like look it up. It's just JV. There's no A. But yeah, I would talk to like a lawyer or someone that is used to like setting stuff up. Um, just just because it's a little more complicated.
Yeah, that's the thing. I was reading up online about these things, and it's like so much more stringent once you start an LLC because, what protects the LLC is like this thing called the corporate veil, where, all of your activities as a person are completely separate from the business activities. So it's like even if you buy any supplies for your property, for example, on your personal credit card at all, like someone could look at that and still sue you, and that like completely defeats the purpose of an LLC. So it's like you really got to be on top of things and be using like your business card, making sure all communications are happening through business email, things like that.
Yeah.
So that could be really tricky.
Yeah. Another thing I want to say for like LLCs and stuff. Some people use it as an excuse to not get started, but I was told this by I think my CPA. He was like, "So I don't have any LLCs currently. Like all of my properties are under my name, right?" And he said that my CPA said that like a lot of people like get stuck up on the LLC side, but no one's gonna come after you for a like if you don't have more than $1 million of like net worth, typically. And the reason for that is it's not worth a lawyer's effort. Like if you don't have, and then especially when you're buying a home and using a loan of like 80% loan, so you're like all in for like less than 100K. They're like, yeah, like it's not worth it. Like I don't want to take this case. Like it's okay. Like we're not gonna go after you, kind of thing. And so for me, like it doesn't like I don't tend to think about it too much until I start doing a little more like a little higher than like say like 500K to $1 million. Then there's something to go like to get after, right? So once my property is actually build more value, and then I get sued on some other side, like they could kind of like come after me at that time. But I try not to get caught up about it in the beginning. Like I'm not worried about like LLC stuff. I think it's good to start off right if you expect to do like this long term, right? Just to set things up from the beginning correctly. But if it's something that's gonna be like holding you back, I don't think it should.
Yeah, that's fair. The only like downside I was thinking is, if we're doing a partnership, we might still need some type of like contract between Mark and I, just like outlining, how much we're both putting in, how much we're both expected to get out.
Yeah, I think you can ask a lawyer or someone to draft a operating agreement or partnership operating agreement, something like that. And basically, like, if you guys were to partner, I want you guys to kind of like set expectations correctly. I think that's one of the hardest parts about working together is like not being clear in the beginning about who's doing what. So let's say like Zuriel, like you're local, like if if needed, like Mark might want you to visit the property, right? Um, and maybe like you want him to deal with like I don't know the finances or the marketing side, right? It's just like making sure like from the beginning, like hey, this is what I'm doing, this is what you're doing. So that way, like if something comes up, like you're not like blaming each other about like oh you should have been doing this, and I should have been, like it's just like making sure like that's upfront. Like I think that's I've seen partnerships get ruined because of not having the correct communication expectations in the beginning.
Yeah, and I don't know, I think we were both still learning. So we're not necessarily like saying we're 100% going to go into partnership and we're going to do X, Y, and Z, but we just want to keep it open as like a pathway for now still. Because, maybe we both do individual investments, but at least we're
Yeah.
learning at the same time.
Yeah.
Damn, Zero,
Uh,
I'm hurt.
no,
No, but you make a valid point, yeah. It's
yeah,
definitely good to consider all of our options moving forward. And once we learn more, have the fun money to be like, do we want a partnership? Do we want to go individual? So definitely good to see all possible options on the board and learn about them early on.
yeah, cool. And I think we're getting close to the end. I feel like location, for example, 2 rows down, like we both want to do Jacksonville. It's in our backyard. We know the area well. So I feel like we don't really need to discuss that too much. But for property class, I think, that's the neighborhood as described in the video. Um, or yeah, something like that. So we wanted to stay away from like A neighborhoods. I think, they're nicer, but like have less cash flow potential. So we were thinking like B and C is like where we might want to stick our range to. Because I think from our understanding, D and below can be like really tricky, really run down, and that requires even more upfront capital to get into a nice position.
Yeah. So um I'm sure you guys heard of this, but like with real estate, it's very much so about location. Like location is probably the biggest, like the best thing. Like if you get a property in a good location, like it's amazing. Um, I would sacrifice some cash flow for a better location. And all the really wealthy people in real estate, they've made the majority of their money in equity, not cash flow. So, for example, like in California, great location, like overall in the Bay Area, they bought their property for 500K. Now it's worth $1 million. You could be cash flowing $1,000, like I don't know, $500 a month on the building, right? And over like the last 10 years, what's that? 500 times 12 times 10. Like it's nowhere near like 500K in like equity. So that's why location will always be like one of the biggest factors. But like you said, like it's harder to make the numbers work in good locations. But let's say an area that's upcoming, like you see a lot of um like you see this area and it's like okay, but all the surrounding areas are like becoming really nice. There's no doubt there's very little doubt that that area will also not appreciate. Like it's gonna go up and down over time. So just keep that in the back of the mind. Like if you see an area that's like starting to get better, and that might be a good place to look because uh like the equity portion is very real. Like like real estate is a long term game, right? So you're gonna be in it. Like, the ideal version is like you're gonna be holding a property for like 5 to 10 years, maybe longer, and in that time, like it could double in value, and that's gonna make you more than the cash flow itself. But like having the cash flow is a good safety net. Like it doesn't really make you lose money. Like it's very nice to have. Um, but if you can think about it in like a 5 to 10 year, 20 year horizon, the money's in the equity. So
Yeah, that's a good point.
that's something I didn't think about too much in the beginning as well, and that's fine. Like I learned a lot. And that property has like appreciated, but like I don't think it's like in the next 5 to 10 years it's gonna go much higher than what it is valued at right now. But I think it doesn't really matter too much like which one you do in the beginning, as long as you learn. Um, but like keep that in mind like later on too.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Um, for your buy box, how do you think about purchase price? Like, if you were to starting off, like, did you try to stay within like a percentage of your income, or like, what are your general guidance lines for that?
Um, that's a good question. I've really thought too much about it, but it's I mainly look for like cash on cash return, and then I was like, well, how much money do I have, and how much money do I need? I always want like maybe like 3 to 6 months of like buffer for like mortgage payments if say like the renter didn't want to pay and you had to evict them and all this stuff, right? You want to like have some safety net to keep you on board. And honestly, you guys are both like have good jobs, like you'll be fine. But like, let's say like, like worst comes to worst, like you get laid off, your tenant stops paying, like you want to have some kind of buffer for that, for like those worst case scenarios. Um, so yeah, I would just say like have some kind of like piggy banking ready for emergencies and stuff.
Gotcha. Okay. So something where it's not so expensive that if, something came up, you wouldn't be able to afford the monthly rent on your own, basically.
Yeah, like don't like if you had 100K, don't use all that 100K on the property, and then something bad happens and you can't make the payments. The worst thing is not being able to make the payments.
Cool. And since on the rehab costs, because I feel like purchase price is pretty clear. I feel like this is something you've had a lot of, experience on fixing up a few of your duplex units. Um, what were your thoughts? Like, did you say like, oh, did you look at it from a project basis where you're like, I want to do X, Y, Z, it's going to cost this much? Or were you thinking like, it only cash flows this much, so, and I think it could cash flow, this in the future with a $10,000 or $20,000 investment, so I'll do it. Like, what's your thought process?
So for that, there's a lot of general guidelines on like how much it is to improve or like replace flooring or do paints or whatever the heck. Um, for rehab, uh, in the beginning, I guess like when you're just looking at a house, I kind of have like a basic idea of like what costs what. So like flooring, it's based on square feet. It's typically about $3 a square foot, like $2 to $3 a square foot if you hire a good contractor. Some people charge more. On average, about $2.50 to $3 a square foot. Um, and then that's for installation. And then for material, it's another like depends on how nice it can range, but like anywhere from two to like upwards of 10. But like let's say like for me, like I always did LVP, which is around $3 to $4 a square foot. And so depending on the size of the home you buy, you can kind of guess like how much it is. It's going to be around 5 to 10K, give or take, typically on average. And then paints kind of similar. I did my own painting, so I don't have like a general like guideline on how much paint is, but that's probably another like 5 to 10K. Let's say like around five. Honestly, it's not too much, but and then like those are the two main things you're going to be doing for like the majority of stuff, and then appliances. You just have to have like a general idea of like all these costs, and then you're like, okay, like at this home, like this is what we would need to do, and I always like to budget like around 10 to 20K in renovations, just for my own like knowledge of like, okay, I'm probably gonna put in like probably 10 to 20K somewhere around there to fix that up and all that stuff. But if you know a good like person that does it cheap, like and well, like it has to be cheap and good. Like if you can find someone that does that, like it's gonna be great. Like I love that. Yeah, but
Besides
for rehab,
floors, what? Oh, sorry.
yeah.
I was gonna say,
Oh
besides
no,
floors and painting, what are the best value add renovations?
flooring is gonna be LVP, luxury vinyl plank for the most part. I'm not a big fan of carpet because you have to replace it all the time. And then uh, luxury vinyl plank.
Not low moisture plank, luxury vinyl plank.
That's fine.
Wow. Luxury vinyl, my bad. I need a new headset. Wait,
And then
luxury vinyl. Sorry.
yeah,
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 Thank you.
yeah. I like it because it's pretty much like waterproof, and if it scratches, like no one can tell. Um, like hardwood floor, it bends with moisture, so I'm not a big fan. But painting, typically white. I would look at for painting. It's kind of based off what the neighborhood does. So if you see a flip nearby and they sold recently for a really good price, like just kind of copy that.
hmm.
Or like what are all the rentals that the more expensive rentals and what color paint do they have? But the easiest is white because it's like the most common. It's easy to like touch up.
Yeah, and Mark, I think he said that LVP does not bend with moisture, right? You?
Yeah, it
Okay.
doesn't bend.
Thank you.
Yeah, wood does. You put water with wood and it starts to like mold. So I'm not a big fan of like engineered hardwood, but like that's like the best quality flooring, blah blah blah. But I just like LVP for rental, like that's fine.
Cool.
All right. And then so I guess real quick, you just to summarize that section. So 10 to 20 in investments roughly per property. And that's more like a flat nothing that ties to the actual property value, would you say? Like the
Um, you can walk through the property and see like, oh, like most likely like the flooring here needs to be replaced. Let's say the entire house flooring needs to be replaced, and you can just do the math on the square feet times, let's say like, 250 plus $3, so 550 per square foot, right? So for 1,500 square feet, times 550, that's about $8,000 somewhere around there. Like, okay, the flooring's about 8K, painting's probably another like 5K. So we're expecting 13K. Appliances, maybe it's white. You want to have, chrome. That's like not too much. It's like 3K. Appliances are actually pretty cheap. They're probably one of the cheapest things in this stuff. It's usually kitchen and bathroom. Really expensive.
okay. Good to know. And I think we have less than 1 minute left. So
Yeah. But yeah, anyways, less than a minute. So any last questions? Text me.
Yeah, I
yeah.
think this is a good starting point for Mark and I to like review the info and kind of see where our shared values are and where we want to go in the future.
Yeah, sounds good. Hope it was helpful.
Super
Good
helpful.
seeing you
Thank you
guys.
so much.
This is great,
Yeah,
you.
yeah, no
Thank you.
problem.
All right, talk to you
Sounds
guys
good.
later.
Talk to
All
you all
right.
later.
Take care, guys.